which means you may need to bring him your questions. You may need to bring him your doubts. You may need to bring him your situation, your pain, your past, your needs, your next steps. Put all of this and heavily put it on him. I'd like to recommend to you this book, won the 2015 Theodore Seuss Geisel Award for the most distinguished American book for beginning readers. Here's the cover of that book. It's called Waiting is Not Easy. It's by a man by the name of Mo Willems, and he has some tremendous insight. This book will only take you 5 minutes to read. I mean, it's that good of a read. It's a quick read. And in this book, Willems deals with something that every single one of us has to deal with. It's a universal situation where you and I will find ourselves waiting. In this book, Waiting is Not Easy, Willems introduces us to an elephant named Gerald. And Gerald has a friend who's a pig. So you have a pig and you have an elephant. And this pig takes Gerald outside and says, I have a surprise for you. So he says, stand right here. But you have to wait for the surprise. Well, Gerald's like, I'm happy to wait. I'll wait. I want the surprise. Why not wait for the surprise? Of course I'll wait for He's all excited. And he begins to wait. And he waits. And he waits. And he waits. And he waits some more. But Gerald is an impatient elephant. He wants the surprise now. But in order to see the surprise, he has to wait. At one point, he declares, I will not wait any longer. But he decides to keep waiting. He continues to grow frustrated because the day is beginning to turn into night, and the darkness is beginning to settle in, and it's getting darker and darker because they've been outside all day, and things are now getting harder to see. So he's afraid he's not going to see the surprise. Isn't that the case when you and I have to wait? It seems like it gets darker and darker. Gerald says soon we'll not be able to see anything. We've wasted all of this time. Until all of a sudden, he looks up and he says, oh, that's the surprise. The beautiful, glorious night sky. And he declares, now that was worth the wait. How's your waiting going? Feel stuck? Are you wondering, when is God going to move? When's he going to fix? When's he going to forward my progress? When is he going to move that person's heart? There's so much in our lives that, if we're honest, we have to wait for. So our series is called Still Standing. We're covering the first 7 verses of Psalm chapter 37. You've heard us sing about it already this morning. We're talking about what it is to be still before the Lord and to wait patiently for him. Last week, we learned the first of 7 imperatives. Let me cover these 7 imperatives that are found in the first 5 verses of Psalm 37. I gave you this list last week. I'll give it to you again. The first one is don't fret. See, it's a beginning point, because if you're found fretting, you won't trust and you won't do these other things, right? So the initial imperative is do not fret, but instead trust and do good and dwell and enjoy safe pasture, or another translation, cultivate faithfulness, or another translation, befriend faithfulness. Delight in the Lord and commit your way. Here are 7 things that we're to do proactively when we find ourselves in God's waiting room. You ever been to the doctor and you had to sit in the waiting room and you feel like, man, they just wasted 45 minutes of my life? Because you go in and you sit down and you do nothing except wait. They got all kinds of magazines. You grab the magazine, you flip through the magazine, you look around, you wonder, how come that person came in after me and they've gone in before me? You know what I'm saying? Okay, you're with me then. Okay, yeah, that's the reality of waiting, it feels like, in our lives. We wait and we simply do it on our heels. We don't do it proactively. Well, the Bible teaches us how to wait on the Lord in a proactive way. And that first imperative is don't fret. The second one we're looking at today is trust. Look at Psalm 37, 1-7. It says, of David, fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in him, and he will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. Be still before the Lord. Wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Remember, the punchline is Psalm 37, 7a. It says, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. See, what we want to convey, what we want to make sure we communicate to you is that if you find yourself waiting, you would say, okay, this is a good place. And it's a good place because this is where God is going to do some of his best work in my life. Now, you might not sign up for that. You might not think this is what you need. But if you find yourself waiting, God sees that it's something we need in our lives to develop. He's not going to waste our waiting or the struggle we are in if we will not fret and, what we're looking at today, trust in him. And those two things are at the top for a reason, because if I'm fretting, I'm not doing these other things. And if I'm not trusting, I'm not going to commit my way. I'm not going to delight in him. I'm not going to befriend faithfulness. I'm not going to do good. So these first two things are very important. Do not fret. Don't fret. It leads only to evil. You get all burning and you do things you don't want to do. Instead, here's what I want you to do. And everything's built on what we're talking about today. Trust. Trust. So verse 3 is where we find ourselves. Psalm 37, verse 3. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. So we're going to look at the first four words of verse 3. Psalm 37, 3a. Trust in the Lord. The word trust means to be confident or sure. To be confident or sure. The word Lord is in the Hebrew, if you're reading it, it's the name of God, Yahweh. The name of the God of Israel that he gives to the Israelites through Moses. We're going to see this in Exodus 3. So if you want to flip to Exodus 3, we'll be there for a few moments. Exodus 3, in verses 14 and 15, look what God says to Moses. Remember, we looked at this last week in the don't fret portion of our study. In Exodus 3, God is calling Moses to go no longer be a shepherd like he's been over the last 40 years, but instead to return to Egypt where he grew up. And in returning to Egypt, he's going he's being tasked to stand before Pharaoh and command that the Israelite people be released, be set free. Exodus 3, 14 and 15, God said to Moses, remember Moses' question, so who shall I say has sent me? Like, who are you that I need to tell them? Like, he's negotiating in his mind. What's he going to do? So he's buying himself some time. And Exodus 3:14 says this, God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, notice L-O-R-D in all caps, the Lord, except when I put it on the screen here for whatever reason. The God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. So we have I am who I am. Tell them I am has sent me to you. And then he says, the Lord. Now, here's just a quote of the footnote from the English Standard Version. It says, the word Lord, when spelled with capital letters, stands for the divine name Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. That's the Hebrew letters. which is here connected with the verb haya, which means to be, in verse 14. I am who I am. I exist. I am the pre-existing one. I am the God of your father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Tell them that Yahweh sent you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the pre-existent one. Now notice with me for a moment what the Lord says to Moses here in verses 7 and 8 of Exodus 3. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering, and I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. So what do we see about who God is in these verses? He is a God, and we'll give you this list here. He is a God who sees our affliction. He's a God who hears our cries. He's a God who knows our suffering. He's a God who comes down to deliver us. He's a God who brings us into a good land. Tell them this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep the covenant I made with Abraham. The covenant-keeping God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The all-knowing, the all-seeing, the ever-present one who exists. He sees our calamity and comes to rescue us and brings us into a different kingdom. This is the God revealed to Moses at the burning bush. This is the God that David worships and pursued with his whole heart. And this is the Lord Jesus who saves us. He sees our affliction. He knows our cries. He knows our suffering, and he comes down to deliver us and to bring us into a good land. This is why David can say in Psalm 37, 7a, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Trust in the Lord. Now, here's what's true. When we're waiting, one of the last things that we want to do is be still. That's why they have magazines there, because you're like, I need to do something with this energy. And so you grab and you flip, and then you throw it down and you wait and then you check your email and you search something. Or my wife, she's probably buying something online while she sits there, Because when we're waiting, we want to move. Don't tell her I said that. Thanks. When we're waiting, we want to do something, right? In our culture, being still is not in fad. It's not in vogue. We are a go and hustle kind of a culture. See, the message of our culture is crush life by these different life hacks. Here's how you will take more ground. But the ancient wisdom of David is be still before the Lord. The ancient wisdom of David is trust in the Lord. Now, what happens when we're still? A couple of things happen when you're still. Number one, we can evaluate how we're doing at trusting the Lord. Somewhat of the prompt in the video there before I got up is take a moment. When you're still, you can evaluate how you're doing at trusting the Lord. Is there an area I'm not trusting God in? The second thing that happens when we're still is we can evaluate who we're becoming instead of being focused on all the doing. Because doing comes out of being. Being precedes doing. And so we're being still and we're letting God shape our lives. Because in the place of stillness, God does some of his greatest work. Listen to Henry Nouwen. Solitude is not a private therapeutic place. Rather, it is the place of conversion. The place where the old self dies and the new self is born. Mike Cosper, in his book, Recapturing the Wonder, says, in solitude, we seek God. But the first thing we encounter is ourselves. The real you shows up with all of its embarrassing attributes. Solitude often forces us to look these sorrows in the face and makes us reckon with a cold reality. We like our busyness. We like the chaos of our lives. We like it because it distracts us from ourselves. What do you do when you find yourself in God's waiting room? Be still. And trust. Trust in the Lord. Tell God, God, I want to trust in you. Help me trust you more. What does that mean, to trust in the Lord? It means to put your full weight on the God who sees your affliction, hears your cries, knows your suffering, comes down to deliver you, and brings you into a good land. You put your full weight on him, which means you may need to bring him your questions. You may need to bring him your doubts. You may need to bring him your situation, your pain, your past, your needs, your next steps. Put all of this and heavily put it on him. God, I trust in you. I hurt, I ache, I'm disappointed. But you see my cares, my concerns, my cries, my suffering. You come down to deliver me. You bring me into a good land, and I'm going to trust in you, and I'm going to wait upon you. I'm going to have confidence in you that you can carry that weight, that you can solve it, that you can sustain it, that you can see it, and you can supernaturally flex if it's needed. Trust, friend, while you wait. Don't fret. Don't be anxious. Don't burn. Trust. David is trusting the full weight of the Lord when he sees his enemies advancing, when he sees the challenging dynamic beyond his control. And so he takes courage by trusting the Lord. But here's our problem. We often put our full weight on the Lord, and then for some reason we take it off. We put our full, okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to do this. You might resolve today that you're going to put your full weight on the Lord as you trust in him, as you wait. And you find yourself tonight trying to fix it again. Maybe it's just me, I don't know. But you decide to trust, and then you decide to take it back. We're double-minded when we do that. It's like the Apostle Peter when he asked Jesus if he could walk on the water. Remember the story? Remember the context? John the Baptist has been killed. Jesus goes to a solitary place to pray and to grieve, and the crowds discover him. He's in a desolate place. He's not in town. He's in a desolate place. The crowds discover him, and they go to him, and he has compassion upon them, and he heals all of their diseases. And then he knows they're hungry, and he tells his disciples, hey, we need to feed these guys. And they're like, no, send them away. No. Give me an offering, and I'll do something amazing. And so he feeds the 5,000. And it says in Matthew's gospel, these are just the men. So that doesn't count the women and children. So 10, 15,000, who knows, 12 baskets full left over. Remember that. Then Jesus is pretty exhausted, and he says, all right, guys, y'all get in the boat, and I'll see you soon. Go across the Sea of Galilee. I'll meet you there. And he goes again to pray to a desolate place. We see this pattern in Jesus' life. He goes before the Father often, and he sits with the Father. The disciples are in the boat, and they're headed across the lake, and there's a mighty wind working against them that they're not making any progress. As a matter of fact, it's the fourth watch of the night. They've been at it a while. Jesus decides to walk out on the water to them. They're freaking out. They think they're seeing a ghost. As he gets close, they're like, it's a ghost. This is not a good situation from their perspective. He says, do not be afraid, it is I. And so Peter's like, okay, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you. Like, I want to do that. I want to try that. Come on. Notice this, Matthew 14, 28 through 31. Watch how Peter trusts and doubts. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? Do you notice that Jesus didn't still the wind when Peter stepped out of the boat? We're waiting for the wind to die down. Then we'll trust. Jesus doesn't still the wind. He invites him to take a step. And then Peter sees he's coming, it's working, I'm walking on water. And he sees the wind, and he experiences the wind, sees the waves, and what does it say? He began to doubt. He became afraid. When we take our eyes off of Jesus and we look at the circumstances, fear creeps in, my friend. And Jesus is like, oh, why did you doubt? See, in moments, Peter displays both faith and doubt, which is the reality for all of us. Clearly, in the presence of Jesus, there's faith and there's peace. And similar, in the presence of wind and waves, there is doubt. Craig Blomberg, the great New Testament scholar, says the word doubt suggests the idea of trying to go in two different directions at once, or of serving two different masters simultaneously. David saying to us, trust in the Lord, the covenant-keeping God who sees, who hears, who knows, who comes down, and who brings you into a good land. David says, don't doubt. Don't be afraid, but trust. So take a moment and ask this question. It's a question we saw on the screen. It's the question I'll ask you again, and I'll ask you at the end. So you're going to get it 3 times today. Where is God calling you to trust him? And what area of your life or areas? Does it have to do with your career? Some with your family? Something with your finances? Maybe it's a shift in your career towards your future. Like if you take this fork in the road, then you're playing it out in your mind and it's not as clear, it's a little cloudy. So you're stuck right there. Maybe it's in health, areas of health. Maybe God's calling you to trust him with difficult relationships. Something with your children, your marriage, who you should or shouldn't marry. Think through the areas of your life and just ask the Lord even now, Lord, is there an area I'm not trusting in you? Let me give you 3 encouragements today. 3 encouragements, real practical handles, okay? Trust God when he says go. Trust God when he says go. Some of you have been waiting a while in God's waiting room, right? You know he's been preparing you, and it's been cloudy. You don't know how it's going to work out, and there's cloudiness. And just the way I describe it in my own life is I'll see and sense a stirring, but the clouds come in. I don't understand it all. I can see, but there's a lot between here and there, and there's clouds. In the clouds, it's hard to know which way to go and where to set the foot, and so you let the clouds be cloudy, because that's what they are, and you just wait on the Lord. But then there's this moment, what happens is the clouds part, and you're like, oh. And it goes from cloudy to clear. When it goes from cloudy to clear, you see it, it seems to make sense, and you know where to put your foot next. When God says go, trust him. Take a step. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's household. Miraculous story. Remember, he kills somebody and kills an Egyptian and has to flee the land. He flees the land, and as he flees the land, he goes to Midian and he just figures out, well, this is going to be my life. I grew up in a palace, but now I am going to be tending sheep. And so he just settles in and chooses contentment, and he takes a wife and has a family, and he's a shepherd for 40 years. Does a lot of waiting as a shepherd. David did a lot of waiting as a shepherd. But God appears to Moses in a burning bush, and he says to him, hey, Moses, I want to do something with your life. It's time to go. It's time to go. When God says go, listen, trust is required. We saw this last week as Moses was fretting and Moses is throwing up excuses. Let's look at it again in verses 10 and 11 of Exodus 3. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. I have a greater purpose for your life and what I'm going to do with your life. That's often why God says go, because he sees further, farther, and greater. And he wants to use you in his grand plan. And I can just see Moses looking around like, you got the wrong guy. Moses says, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? Friends, for some of you, God's been saying it's time. It's time to go. It's time to take that step. It was cloudy. It's now clear. Now is when I want you to move. You're going to have to trust him. You have to put the full weight of your life on the Lord. The covenant-keeping God who knows your heart, sees your needs, hears your cries, comes down to meet you and to bring you into a new land. When God says go, trust is required. And he does it for a greater purpose, his glory, his renown. Second encouragement, don't just trust God when he says go, trust God when he says slow. Trust God when he says slow. Some of you have been waiting a while and the waiting continues. That's what I mean by slow. You have to continue to wait. David says in verse 25, I have been young and now I'm old. And I've never seen the righteous forsaken or their children begging for bread. When God calls you to wait longer, trust is required. I said this in the 11 o'clock service last week. I want to say it again. Here's the struggle. Here's the temptation when you find yourself waiting and still waiting when God says slow. The temptation is you harden your heart. God, I've been begging, I've been asking, I've been seeking, I've been knocking, and you haven't been showing up. God, I'm done. I've been asking you to change him. I've been asking you to change her. And I'm stuck here. I can't do it. You need to do it. Why won't you do it? And you harden your heart. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says this, above all else. In other words, this is the highest priority. Above all else, guard your heart, for it's the wellspring of life. Don't harden your heart because you're impatient. Because God's finest work is while you wait. And you feel stuck there and then you harden your heart. What do? You keep yourself from thinking he's going to change that person or that situation or what have you, and you keep him from changing you. You're like, I've concluded you're not going to do anything, so... And you take back control. What are you going to do? Then you're going to fret. Then you're going to burn. Then you're going to be bound with anxiety. Again, maybe it's just me because I can trust him in the morning and by the evening time, grab it, hold of it again, right? So just do not harden your heart because the hard heart is the impenetrable, is a wall that cannot be penetrated. I tried to say that and it didn't come out well. Is your God big enough? Strong enough? Mighty enough? Does he hear your cry and see your affliction and know your pain? And has he in the past come down to meet with you and take you into a new land? He can do it again. Don't harden your heart. Keep trusting him. Put your full weight, keep your full weight there. Don't stop waiting. Wait on the Lord with your full weight. When God says, slow, don't try to take control. We see this in Joseph's life. Here's the thing about Joseph. If you read his story, Jacob's favored son wore the coat of many colors. He got this vision. You're going to bow before me. He didn't steward that well because you notice it created hatred in the lives of his brothers, and he got rebuked by his father at the second time he shared it. Who Joseph was when he received that vision and who he was when it was fulfilled, two very different people. And all we know of Joseph's life is struggle and suffering and difficulty and waiting. He's thrown into a pit and sold into slavery. Then he works for a guy named Potiphar. Foreign language, foreign land, and now he's enslaved. There's no freedom. But something happened in Joseph's life. This is a great place. This waiting place is a place of attitude adjustment, attitude calibration. Joseph submitted to the authority in his life, and he's like, well, I better make the most of this. And what does the word of God say? And the Lord was with Moses, and whatever he did, he prospered, so much so that that Potiphar didn't have to worry about anything in his household. So he found a way to rise to the ranks in slavery. He rose to the top. Then he's accused of rape. He's thrown into a prison. And he's in that prison. He's like, what am I doing here? But he's like, well, I'm going to make the most of this prison. And he worked, and Joseph had the gift of administration. And he served in such a way that the captain of the prison guard didn't have to worry about anything but what he ate and drank. Because Joseph was that good, and the Lord's favor was on Joseph. The grace of God favored his life, and he made the most of that season, that situation, being in prison. But there was this moment, because he interpreted the dreams, the dream of the baker and the cupbearer. Y'all remember the dreams? There's this moment when Joseph tries to take control because he got tired of waiting. The cupbearer has a dream. He says, okay, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to do this, and you're going to be restored, and sorry, buddy, you're done. And then he says something to the cupbearer, very interesting. It's Genesis 40, verse 14. Only remember me when it is well with you. And please do me the kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, and so get me out of this house. Like, you're going to be in front of Pharaoh. He's the one guy that can change the course of my life. Would you please remember me? And the cupbearer did not remember him. He had to wait for 2 more years. Verse 23, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. See, God needed more development in Joseph's life for those 2 more years. There was a rough edge still. He needed him. You don't want to take something out of the oven until it's fully baked. You take it out when when it's not fully baked, it just misses the mark. And this plan that God had for Joseph's life, vital, very important. So if you find yourself waiting and trying to kick the doors open in your life and they stay shut, guess what? You need to bake a little longer. It's okay. Be still before the Lord. Trust in Him. Wait patiently for Him. The third encouragement that I would give you as we come near our conclusion time is this. Trust God when He says no. Trust God when He says no. Some of you have been waiting a while. You've been praying. You've been asking. You've been seeking. You've been knocking, and you get the same answer. No. No. Trust is required when a no is given. Do you know that? The Apostle Paul was told no. Notice this in 2 Corinthians 12, 7 and 8. So to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. No, I'm not releasing you from that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that struggle. I'm going to use that suffering. Lean on me, Paul. Trust in me, Paul. My grace is sufficient for you, Paul. Jesus was told no. 3 times he pleaded with the Father, take this cup from me, the cup of the wrath of God. But what did Jesus pray? How do we see his trust? He made this statement, but not my will, but your will be done. Trust. Sometimes God's going to tell you no. Will you trust him? Or do you harden your heart? So let's get real practical for just a moment. It's the 3rd time we're going to ask you the question. I don't want anybody to move, okay? So orchestra, don't come yet. When I pray, you can start to come, okay? But would you bow your head with me and ask this question a 3rd time? Lord, in what area of my life am I not trusting you? Be still before the Lord.